Hello everyone and welcome to the Sydneyist, the best radio show in Sydney, on Sydney. I'm Elizabeth Farrelly. We're broadcasting from Studio A this week at Eastside Radio on 89.7 FM or streaming on eastsidefm.org. Thank you to Tony for the great promo and thank you to our producer, as ever, Sophie Kennedy-White. Tonight we're talking about that dreaded Sydney phenomenon, the red brick three-storey walk-up. I'm Elizabeth Farrelly on the Sydneyist, and my guest this evening is architect Tone Wheeler, who has boldly raised his architectural voice in favour of the dreaded, this makes him pull a face, the dreaded three-storey walk-up. Welcome, Tone.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Pleasure to be invited.
You have been bravely, perhaps it's not brave since mid-century, so fashionable now, touting the three-storey walk-up, and in particular, the red brick Sydney version of the three-storey walk-up as the best solution to Sydney's housing woes. Many people in Sydney grew up hating these red brick, square-faced, in my view, overheated uglies. We all have words about that, I don't doubt. And now it seems that this is the solution, which is a bit of a about turn. So let's unpick it a little. First, though, for anybody who doesn't know what a three-storey walk-up is, let's have a definition.
So there are a block of flats, and that particular word, the ugliness of those words, is
block
often
of flats.
block
yeah.
of
the
flats.
Emphasis on the block and the emphasis on the flat.
Flats, yeah. They are apartments. It's interesting that flats have turned into things which are rented and apartments are things which are purchased.
Oh, is that how it goes? I was thinking, what's the difference? Mm-hmm. Because flat sounds a bit down at heel and a bit kind of girls of slender means, you know, and apartment sounds a bit swanky, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's housing commission flats. You never talk about housing commission apartments and so. And it's a generic thing that's an Australian. Well,
you wanted to make a political point, couldn't you?
Yes. Well, no, in America, it's the other way around. In condominiums.
Yeah, your condo.
Condos for sale. What is a three-storey walk-up flat? It's a modest apartment building, usually built on the ground, very little car parking, sometimes car parking underneath it or adjacent on the ground. And it's made up of apartments, usually only four in a plan.
Oh, four
per floor.
So 12 per block.
Yeah. Or if there's some car parking, it might go to 4 stories, car parking underneath it. And the reason that it's 4 is that they're in the corners, so it's really easy to put windows all the way around them.
And also nice to be be on a corner. Isn't it?
That's the whole point. That from the outside, they're all ugly. And by the way,
yes, they are.
I reject.
You resile from the word ugly. I'm a bit fearless about it, but we'll have that conversation.
Yeah, but they're not all red, by the way. There's orange and there's yellow and there's white and they're painted and stuff. There's a lot of mix, you know.
That's true.
And
they're all ugly, though.
And they are very much a Sydney thing.
Yes.
Although
there's lots of them in Canberra as well. Or there were until they started pulling them down.
Pulling down on Northbourne Avenue, which has been a real shame. They're also in Melbourne, but they tended to be much better quality in Melbourne.
Like so many things.
Well, people might know a building at 15 Ackland Street, St Kilda, not because it's in St Kilda, but because it was the home of the Secret Lives of Us with Claudia Carvin and Joel Edgerton and so on. It was a great series, and it always showed the front of that. Yeah, except the interiors and the other parts of it were filmed around the corner at the Esplanade. Yeah. Esplanade.
Okay.
But that one is fancy, and it's a little bit more Art Deco, and there are Art Deco ones in Sydney. And there's a whole variety of them.
But mostly they're kind of 50s and 60s and 70s, is that right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you look at Bondi, for instance, which is home to the three-storey walk-up, you've got everything from the absolute delight of the Pasadena, for instance, which is all done in that sort of mock Spanish revival on the outside of it, with palm trees to it as well. It was built, I mean, if you look around, say, Plumer Road and Balfour Road in Rose Bay, there's a huge number of them in that area, most of which are rental and most of them which are still rental. and they are quite gorgeously made. They're not exposed brick as we know it now. They're quite dark brick and painted pieces and glazed in balconies.
But a lot of them were built as public housing. Is that right? In Canberra,
there was, and and there are three-storey walk-up apartments in Balmain, for instance, which are housing commission.
And Campsie's full of them, and
Kingsford, Kensington, and so on, Randwick,
Botany and Mascot. And
there are so many of them.
Yeah.
And yes, individually they look pretty ugly, but if you take it as a whole, it's actually the most sustainable form of housing.
We like their soul. They may look ugly, but we like their soul.
Well, as you said, it's from the interior. And just to sing in praise of what it's like inside, they are naturally lit. So they've all got windows, and even the bathrooms have windows on the outside. They're not like a modern apartment, which is buried in the inside with a fan.
Opening windows, often casements instead of those horrible top hung.
Or double hung, often double hung, yeah. And they are well lit. Because you can open the windows, you get cross ventilation. Because it's on two sides, you get the ventilation. Because of the length of them, they have to appear a little bit more like a house. There's a corridor in them, off which there are bedrooms, and then you arrive at the living room. So in many cases they feel...
So there's a typical plan, do you mean?
There is a typical plan for it, yes, that you put things on the party wall. You enter between
the bedrooms and then... Is that right?
Yeah, there are...
Or it depends.
There are lots of variations to it, but if you go back to the progenitors of this, which are the sort of the godfathers or godmothers of this, they are the buildings that were built in the 20s and the 30s, particularly in Potts Point. So it's like Byron Hall and Kingsclear. And in order to sell apartments before the Second World War, you had to make them look like houses in the sky, which is what they were called. These aren't. These are...
What, with a balcony and a roof?
When you walked in, you went down a double-loaded corridor with
on both
rooms
sides. So that's the idea of the corridor.
Yeah. Yes. So, for instance, in Kingsclear, which is a very well-known block, it only has 2 apartments per floor, so that it can have windows on 3 sides. And it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. But this is then scaled back after the
Second War.
Well, after the Depression, in fact. And then after the Second World War, with a lack of materials and a need to house a very, very large number of people very quickly, because what you've got to realise is which
is what we've got now.
Well, between 1950 and 1975, the population of Sydney doubled in 25 years. And so what people forget is that we grew a city without too much angst.
How did that happen? Was that...
Three-storey walk-up flats is one of the answers, and a huge number of houses built at the edges by people like Albert Victor Jennings. So the city became based on its bricks, and so all the brickyards were working at full capacity, making bricks, and there were bricklayers, and concrete was then laid by the immigrants. So and one of the
that population growth was immigration as much as sort of baby boom.
Absolutely, it was immigration. It was people who were fleeing Europe.
So when you talk about bricks, I mean that's my impression. As much as I see some of the virtues, and I do like the light, but I think, they're so hot. They're typically shadeless. They're often surrounded by asphalt at-grade car parking, so it's really hot, and there's a lot of reflected heat, and there's usually not much in the way of trees.
Yeah, that's the existing pattern, and that's not part of the pattern that I'm advocating that we copy. Right?
So, all right.
So
good.
they were, just to go back to the materials I made for a moment, there was a lot of concrete involved, some concrete floors, which made them quite soundproof. To go back to the inside, they were... But compared to today's model, which are made from stud work, 2 layers of stud work, and you can bang on it, you can hear it and things, they were quite solid. And one of the reasons it's all made in concrete is that we had this huge immigration to the Snowy Mountain scheme.
Yep.
And when, for instance, Dick Dusseldorp arrived, who was going to found Civil and Civic and then Lend-Lease, he could see that there was a huge learning curve in laying concrete. So we had, amongst the Greeks, the Yugoslavs, the Italians and so on, great layers of concrete and bricklayers. So that was the easiest way to do it. In fact, there was a wonderful cartoonish headline in the Batuta Advocate, which I'm sure all people of Eastside Radio are readers of Batuta Advocate, which had a picture of a three-storey walk-up flat in orange brick, and it said, "The populace yearns for the day when a building like this could be built by two Maltese blokes in 2 weeks using a wheelbarrow." You know, which is part of its charm, is that it could be easily built and quickly built.
And somehow we can't do that anymore. But so I want to come back to them. But you've written about these a lot, or a fair bit, and you've used the triple bottom line argument, which is essentially people, planet, prosperity, as the saying goes. So let's talk about that, because that's sort of that's your reason for proposing them now, as opposed to defending them then.
Well, my argument for people is that they're great to live in because they are. We can now insulate double brick walls, so we can actually
jolly good idea.
Remove that. We can also provide better windows and better technology in it to make living in them much more attractive. But even more than that, it's a strata of only 10 or 12 people. Yeah. And we're now building stratas of 100 to 200 units. So depressing. And it becomes, and that's where, and of course you've only got to watch Four Corners and various things about this, rorts with strata. And part of that is that you're living in a building where you don't know anybody, you don't know who the strata is, you're not involved in it. Whereas if it's a building in which there's no lift to get into to escape, you have to walk up the stairs, you're going to meet the other 9 or 11 residents of the building, and you get to know them, and it becomes like a little community. So I think it has social value from that point of view.
Yep.
You are actually closer than 2 or 3 freestanding homes. You know, you talk about, you need good
closer
neighbours.
Physically.
You're closer physically, therefore you like to know. That's the people. The planet part of it is that they take less resources in order to build them, and than say a 6, 8 or 20-storey tower.
Because there's no lift, etc.
Oh, there's no basement car parking, there's no basement exhaust, there's no... The Meccano set that's out the front of every one of those things is a hydrant. It's a fire hydrant booster.
So you don't have to do all that
You don't have to do all that stuff because there's no sprinklers inside and so on. And because the building...
You don't have to have sprinklers because it's fairly small.
Because it's 3 stories.
Escape easily.
Because it's 3 stories.
You just run down the stairs.
One of the reasons that 8-storey apartments became so prominent in the 70s, if you think Military Road and Spit Road, all through Mossman, and there's hundreds of these versions which are 8 stories. That's because 9 stories in those days required sprinklers and 2 stairs and stair pressurization. There's a whole lot of stuff that makes it expensive. About 3 or 4 years ago, under pressure from the fire brigade, the building code changed it from 8 stories to 4. Oh. There's no reason, there's no evidence. There's a lot of people, myself included, who think that was a dreadful mistake. Because there's no evidence that sprinklers are necessary in that, because there haven't been big fires in these solid brick and concrete buildings.
Only in those plastic-clad ones, which is a completely different issue.
No, we didn't have the deaths in here. That Grenfell Tower's different. We don't have time to go into the fact that Grenfell could never have been built in Australia. That's one of the things. We have very strong building codes. So 3 stories is good. This is going to sound very Animal Farmish. The 3 stories good, 4 stories bad. But it marks a trigger. Yes. But also 3 stories in terms of people is close to the ground. There's that whole thing that talks about the way in which design prevents alienation and so on, and also prevents crime, is that you can look out your window and call to your child down below at 3 stories. You can't do that at 8 stories, I mean, you could ring them on the phone, but there's a much nicer thing just standing on the balcony saying, hey, Johnny and Jill, come in for dinner. But I think there's that part of it, that the natural ventilation, natural lighting means it uses less energy. You don't need air conditioning in it. You could do it with ceiling fans. So that's part of it. And then the prosperity is that through the auspices of a group called Think Brick, which is the brick manufacturers and promotion industry. They're the industry representatives for bricks and tiles.
Let me just say we're not being paid by these people. But
No,
go
not at all. But they've been friends to me because they've helped in research on climate design and so on, and they've got a series. They've sponsored a series of very small buildings at Newcastle University, which they do a lot of sustainability research. They paid for quantity surveyors to look at what was a 3-storey walk-up flat cost in today's money right now to build. Versus,
to build exactly the same, or to build with these improvements?
With these improvements. Oh, this is with the improvements and so on, and it's got much better lighting, modern kitchen, modern bathrooms and so on, all
and
fitted
what's the
out.
Answer?
Versus a 6-storey building with underground car parks and lifts and all that other things. The 3-storey building's about $429,000 to build, and the apartment inside that larger building, which is exactly the same size and exactly the same finishes, exactly the same apartment, is $536,000.
Okay,
you know,
so
it's like
20%.
it's 25% more expensive. Yeah,
okay.
And that's one of the campaign things. So that's my people, planet, and profit. You know?
We're going to come back to that. There's some interesting questions about whether we rebuild or adapt to these buildings, and there are also interesting naysayers about some of this argument. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But first, we're just going to have a little music break.
Well, I tried to run my game. She said, man, it's just the same old thing that I heard before. And I'm too tired to go to your show again and again. And she started to explain. She said, man, I understand why you're playing. Just might make it. And I'm too tired to take it anymore. Play something sweet, play something mellow, play something I can sink my teeth in like jello, play something I can understand, yeah. Play me some brickyard blues. Play something sweet, now make it funky, just make me lay back and grin like a monkey, yeah. Play something I can understand, play me some brickyard blues. Well, I started to sweat. She said, don't get upset, 'cause you might just break a string, and that won't do a thing for your show, don't you know? So I said to myself, I said, self, don't you see what is sailing through your soul? And I got to have some more, don't you know? Play something sweet, play something mellow, play something I can sink my teeth in like jello, play something I can understand, play me some brickyard blues. Alright, play something sweet, now make it funky, just make me lay back and grin like a monkey.
That was Brickyard Blues. We've been talking a lot about bricks by Bridie King from an album called My Blues in 1999. I'm Elizabeth Farrelly with you on the Sydneyist at Eastside Radio on 89.7 FM, and I'm speaking with architect Tone Wheeler about the highs and lows of the 3-storey walk-up. Tone, so we've just been talking about the joy, the virtues, if you like, of the 3-storey walk-up and how it connects people, and it's relatively human scale, and there's a lot of light. But are we talking about adapting the ones that we have, or are we talking about rebuilding, knocking them down and rebuilding them in a contemporary way?
No, you want to keep every single one of them. You know,
Yes.
the most sustainable building is the building that's already built.
Indeed.
However,
So we can add insulation and so on?
oh, we can. Yeah,
Easily, I
yeah,
mean.
easily. Yeah, and one of the things is that you add outsulation, not insulation,
Which is a skin.
which is a skin that goes on the outside of it. Yeah, so you
Does
can.
it stop them looking ugly?
Yes, it does. Well,
What does it look like? And is it plastic? And is it flammable?
it's basically a base for render.
Okay.
So the whole thing looks like it's rendered, but before you put the render over the bricks, you put it over an insulation layer.
Yeah. Because you see, I look at those things and they're red bricks, and I think you could do a lot with a lot of white paint and cover them with ivy and then plant a whole lot of trees and they'd be fine.
Well, as Frank Lloyd Wright once said, surgeons bury their mistakes. Architects can only recommend the growing of pines.
That's right.
That's
everywhere.
Everywhere. So, but yes, they are fairly unattractive in the Sydney heat. They get hot because they're dark in colour.
Yeah, red brick and Sydney heat.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And I only last night I was out trying to hunt down the same position for a photograph I took 40 years ago because I'm getting a photographic exhibition together for things. And it features Bondi. And I took this photo from somewhere up on the hill in Bondi of all these red roofs. They were red tile roofs. And the photo I published before, I nicknamed it the Red Sea at Bondi, right? Which, for double entendre there. But the thing about that photo when I looked at it again is that it's covered with trees. There's an enormous number of trees have grown up. And an enormous number of the buildings are now white for various reasons.
Yeah. Well, you think of that lovely Los Angeles tradition of the Spanish Mission white stucco thing, which just takes all that heat out of the look as much as the feel.
There is a model in Los Angeles that you mentioned, which is the Courtyard House, which is a public courtyard, not a private courtyard. It's a public courtyard with a series of houses around it and car parking somewhere else. It was actually developed by a husband and wife developer couple in the 1920s called the Zweibels, which is quite interesting. The Zweibels. And it persists in Los Angeles.
Model.
I love that model too, but it's too late for Sydney. Sydney's already got a model. It's a three-storey walk-up.
So basically we've got these kind of plonk, plonk, plonk blocks, mostly surrounded by car parking, and as you say, there isn't always one per flat, but usually there's car parking. I'm thinking of the ones in Glebe, for example, and some of those inner city places. But so we stuck with that plonk, plonk, plonk planning?
No, I think there's three things that you would do if you...
Plonkism, I call it.
Plonkism? Yeah, well, if you've got a red brick three-storey walk-up flat, there's three things that I think you would do. Firstly, you would try and fix the outside of it by putting insulation and reflectivity. The second thing you do is to take the tile roof off because the tiles are tired and they're gone, and replace it with a roof that might have a garden on top of it or might have drying outside.
Nice. Yes.
Or you pay for it all by putting another penthouse up the top of it, or all the
So it's a four-storey walk-up.
Well, no, what you do is you actually make all the apartments on the top two-storey.
Okay.
So it still remains as a three-storey building, but they're maisonettes inside. And then the third thing is you put better balconies on them, because quite a lot of them don't have balconies.
Yeah,
and
or they
we
have those
love
unusable.
a balcony.
Yes, we do like balconies.
Yeah, but they've got steel, folded steel, which is all rusted through and it's dangerous. But you don't go and replace it with glass, because that's even worse.
Glass balconies.
Yeah,
no.
you just want to have privacy on the balcony or make them bigger. Now, there are those things that are done in Bondi. There's a couple of really spectacular conversions. I'm not going to tell you where. That's because one of the things that I think is the model is that Bondi is now, it's gone from working class, and it was not
to ultra rich. I was going to say it's not very replicable, probably, if it's Bondi.
It in one sense it is, because the properties are now so valuable that you don't want a red brick building. Yeah. And I think that will filter through because it's been paid off.
One of the things that occurs to me is that in a hilly place like Bondi or a lot of Sydney, you could actually have three-storey walk up and three-storey walk down. So if you could have a street entrance in the middle, you could actually have a six-storey building, couldn't you, without a lift? Or is that breaking the rules?
No, absolutely. The very first block of flats, going back to that term, that was built in Mossman was designed by a guy called John Brogan, who's an interesting architect, because he did a building in Potts Point called Wilderfell Gardens, which is one of the most fabulous.
Yes. Right? Beautiful thing.
And he designed this apartment building as the first one that was built in Warringah Road in Mossman. That is exactly that. It's so hilly that you go up and you go down. But it has no lift in it. There are cars.
And could you do it now with our current regulations?
No.
No.
Unfortunately.
Because
That's the point.
All right.
Yeah, I think
so look, I'm just going to stop you because we've got a couple of minutes left, about 3, and I want to ask you about, there are a number of people who've written against the three-storey walk-up as some kind of, and I'm quoting Angelo Corsano's argument, who quotes, in turn, work by McGregor Westlake for the government architect. I'm sure you will have seen this, but he says, in most cases, for the middle ring of suburban Sydney, you need about 9 apartments per typical single-dwelling lot to attain development profitability. And he argues that, therefore, this is the sour spot of development and that the idea of the three-storey walk-up revival is a romantic dream. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm sorry that Angelo and Peter hold those opinions. Clearly they weren't taught well enough.
We'll have to have them on the show, won't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They weren't taught well enough, but they were taught by me.
Oh, they're your students. Oh.
Well, inter alia, no, not Angelo, not Peter so much. But the thing is, they are right at
so
one
they
stage.
say there's no room for landscape, and they're ugly, and they're not profitable, and it can't be done.
No, we've done drawings of it, which mean that it meets all of the apartment design guide codes. It's only 3-storey. You can put 10 apartments there. You can get private outdoor space. You don't have to put it on the roof where the waterproofing's a problem. It can be down in a back garden, which is what we love, the outdoor area for the children and stuff. It works. It works in terms of overshadowing and so on. We've done all the studies for it. Part of the problem is that you look at the existing as a precedent, and unfortunately the precedent is deeply involved in the ideas inside it, not the physical fabric. I'm trying to invent a different typology, a different model that would work.
Yes, but we could reinvent the three-storey walk-up in a way that allows the existing fabric to be adapted. And not
only we could, we must.
We must.
And one thing in parting, the new LMR rules, the low and medium rise that the Minns government's just introduced, has one figure in it that's fantastic. It allows for buildings in R2, which is low-rise residential, to be 9.5 metres. In other words, you can put a three-storey block of flats into a residential street.
Just about anywhere.
And I'm sure that's going to horrify the NIMBYs, but my model that I want to put out there is, well, this is not so bad. So say you had a big suburban block, a typical fairly big suburban block with one house in the middle of it. How many, and say you want to replace it with this 12 apartment 3-storey walk-up thing, how many of those blocks could you fit on a typical 900 square metre block? We can put 10 apartments and car parking and gardens and trees. And
so you can multiply density by 10, essentially.
Well, yeah, we're saying 8 because you've got to allow for certain exigencies for it. But yeah, that's what it amounts to.
It sounds brilliant. Let's just do it. We are going to have to stop there. We've run out of time, I'm sorry to say, because it's a great conversation. Thank you, everyone, for listening to The Sydneyist. Our show will be posted on the podcast page after this. And we're handing over now to Yone on the Vinyl Frontier. Good night. Hello, city dwellers. Ever wondered what makes Sydney tick? Well, hold on to your skyscrapers because The Sydneyist is about to unravel the secrets of the concrete jungle like never before. Together, we'll explore this vibrant metropolis from its foundations to its penthouses. We're not just talking about bricks and mortar, we're talking the soul of Sydney. I'm Elizabeth Farrelly. Join me Thursdays at 6 p.m. for The Sydneyist.